of BPIA. I want to welcome you today. So for those of you who are new to the organization, I'd like to give you a quick overview of BPIA. I see got the recording button going. So we were founded in 1989, and our goal is to expand the opportunities, the roles, the numbers of minorities in global affairs in general and in leadership positions in particular. And BPIA fulfills its objectives through educational events and cultural exchanges, professional workshops, mentoring, networking, and scholarships, and events like today. And so we welcome you to become members of BPIA if you're not already. And after my welcome, I'll go ahead and put the link for membership into the chat. And so let me just give you a quick run through of the agenda today, which is quite exciting. So we're going to start off with a president's report from our president on the state, followed by an open Q&A with the audience. We'll then move on to our keynote address, and we're honored to have the president of the Constituency for Africa, Melvin Foote, with us here today to deliver a bit with the audience. We'll then move into some engaging breakouts on the future of BPIA, so brainstorming ideas that the board and members themselves can take forward in the coming year in support of BPIA's mission. Finally, we're going to end off by announcing the results of this year's Board of Directors election, leaving time at the end for some networking. And so with that, I will welcome you again. And I now turn it over to our president, Ms. Alexandria Maloney.
Good morning. Thank you, Sandila, and welcome to BPIA members and our community and friends. We're very excited to conduct this annual general body meeting today on February 11th, 2023. We've come a long way this year, and we're very excited to share the state of the organization with you. So as Sandila mentioned, the mission of BPIA is to increase the involvement and engagement of African Americans and those of African descent in the international affairs field at large. In terms of who can benefit from the organization and the activities that we do, our membership includes students, professionals, senior officials in their career for a variety of different opportunities, including networking, cultural exchange, professional development, and more. In terms of our membership profile, we have over 350 active dues-paying members, a reach of well beyond 9,000. We represent, again, college age to senior official. And as we see here today, our members are located globally. This was the membership report for the end of 2023, giving us the exact numbers in terms of our membership and the membership growth for the year. The total that was confirmed by our governance co-chair was 461 members as of December 2022. This morning, you also received the exciting announcement of our annual report. So the things that I'm sharing here today are all found inside of this report at length. It's about close to 48 pages of the details and in-depth information regarding what I'll be sharing here today. And that information was sent via email to you. So we have three core elements of the BPIA strategic plan that I set into place earlier at the beginning of my tenure this year. It started with the strategic planning and the daily operations of the organizations with our board leadership retreat, where each board member was asked and presented what their strategic plan is for 2023. So the two other important elements of that are how are we engaging the BPIA community and the membership, engaging and growing, and then what opportunities are we bringing to BPIA. And for our technology who's on the line, if you can just keep a track and make sure that folks stay muted while I'm presenting, please. Thank you. I'm just going to go through some key highlights of organizational related developments, again, to give you kind of a broad stroke of the work that we've done this year. So that started with our BPIA Board Leadership Retreat and Strategic Plan, our continued BPIA program series, updating our website and our portals to include Slack, the Opportunity Board, and other platforms that we use. We also activated the BPIA Advisory Council. So that helps to bring us and bring the organization, engage our leaders for those who are interested in bringing financial resources and helping to identify other sources, capital, professional related to the organization. We have a number of new sponsors, partners, and affiliates. And we also updated many of our internal governance practices, including creating a code of conduct. We have a new BPI mentorship platform and our USIP mentorship program, our 2022 career fair. We also initiated by membership chair Cliff Jeffrey, the Off the Record series. We launched a few months ago our BPIA Opportunity Board that has well over 300 folks who are participating and sharing opportunities and internships daily. We've created new committees, working groups, and city and campus liaisons. And we've also worked to update our membership directory inside of our Wadi-Perkat system. Inside the annual report, I won't go through all these specific things, but just to give more color in the specific events that we and programs that we've done throughout the year, we've listed them here by month. So BPIA has been very active and very busy. Many of the events that you see here are member-led, which is amazing. We want to see more of that work. So if you're a member and you think that there may be a information session of interest or a field trip or a site visit, please do consider that for 2023 and 2024. We also began our first Fridays, both virtual and in-person DC mixers. And then the BPIA Fireside Chat series was initiated this year that BPIA members were engaged on monthly White House briefings with senior directors, with community partners, including Foreign Policy for America, as well as a number of fireside chat speaking events in collaboration with Deloitte Government Services, including Undersecretary Bonnie Jenkins, the U.S. State Department Director General of the Foreign Service, Marsha Bernadette, Senior Advisor and BPI member Rachel Thomas, the Saudi Ambassador to the U.S. And many of those events, I'm going to give a shout out to one of our advisory council members, Kombez Abdurrahmi, who has really been a partner in helping to build our opportunities for our members to engage with leadership in our nation. And I'd also like to give a shout out to our CSIS leadership keynote with BPI Advisory Council member Nicole Annandale. BPI Global Take podcast continues to thrive and get us national press and national coverage. Our wonderful host, Alexandria Haidara, was able to interview this year at the United Nations Global Assembly Week, General Assembly Week at the Bill and Melinda Gates Goalkeepers Foundation. Sorry, I'm getting the notifications and it's blocking my screen. Bill and Melinda Gates Goalkeepers Summit and Awards. We were also able to attend the Clinton Global Initiative Week, as well as other programming during the UN General Assembly Week. Our largest event for the year, our virtual career fair, happened this year and will continue to happen. This year, we really made milestones we were very ambitious as the co-chair of the sponsors committee for the career fair. Myself and Danny Evans, who's the VP of Education and Exchange, were the co-chairs of our sponsors committee. We had a number of new sponsorships, organizations and leaders who are making a commitment to support BPIA and to support their commitment to creating sustainable diversity pipelines to their organizations. And so that's a very exciting development with the organization. We also have our past partners and sponsors and affiliates that are listed here and in the annual report. Here is a quick overview of our financial report for the end of 2022 from December. You'll see here, again, there's more detailed information in the annual report, but here you'll see that as of December 2022, the total cash in the bank at the end of the period is noted as $104,605.17. So again, there are a number of ways for our members to engage in the community. We welcome and invite each of you to consider joining some of our committees or working groups. If you find that you have an interest in a particular topic, or maybe want to support fundraising or governance or partnerships, we have opportunities for us to serve, right? And so our goal as a board is to empower our membership and have opportunities for our membership to be able to serve. Again, these are just some of the working groups that are listed based on interest. And then lastly, bringing opportunities to BPIA. So again, we have our new, how can members engage with the organization in real time? That can be done through our opportunity board, posting of job announcements and opportunities, through our BPIA members only Slack channel and directory, sharing information on our social media. We have about 8,000 followers across our platform. From what I heard last month, we have about 5,000 on LinkedIn alone. So that's very exciting that BPIA has a strong visibility. And then our scholarship program. So that's another exciting element. You can read more in the annual report about those specifics. On our high impact partnership sponsorship opportunities, if you work for an organization or you're connected to an organization that may be aligned with the mission of BPIA, we love to make new friends across the space. And then lastly, volunteering. So with that, we will open for Q&A. I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and I think that Sandila is going to come up to help moderate.
So yeah, please put your questions either into the chat, or you can directly message them to me if you would like them to be anonymous, or you can raise your hand. So feel free to come on in. I'll take the first question, which was a really impressive list of all the activities and events and initiatives that were launched this year. This was your first year as president. You have to pick one thing, and it could be a strategic implementation or a single event. Like, what was the highlight of your year as president?
Oh, wow. There were so many. I think honestly, for me, the moments that bring me the most joy in supporting this work and bringing opportunities to our communities is during some of our speaking engagements. So whether it's Director General Marsha Bernadette or Undersecretary Bonnie Jenkins, the highlight for me is when during the networking reception of those events, I see our members engaging directly with our leaders. And for me, that is a real driving force to what this organization is all about. Those opportunities, those chances to interact and engage with the leaders and those who are in positions that we as a community may be interested in supporting and leading one day. So that's been, I think, my highlight in terms of the series.
Fantastic. We've got a question from Jasmine. Would you go into more details about the scholarship and mentorship program? Would you like me to take the question on mentorship programs?
Sure, please.
Sure. So there are two mentorship programs. There's our flagship BPIA mentorship program, which has been running for several years. And that program is online. So you are able to go on our Pushbar platform. You can look through various different mentors and what their offerings are, the frequency with which they'd like to meet, the areas that they can give expertise on, and then you can request meetings, and you can even meet on the platforms. On the platforms, there's also a number of different resources, including prior BPIA trainings, as well as a BPIA mentoring handbook. And we give those trainings twice a year in the fall and the spring. But joining the platform, joining the mentorship program can happen all year round. So just email me and I'll put my email in the chat if you're interested in joining the program. We also have, we're now in our second year, the USIP BPIA Peacekeeping mentorship program. So that's where current graduate students that are BPIA members are paired with USIP staff for the period of a year. And you also gain access to a number of different courses at George Washington, in addition to in-person events. And so just for an example, the latest cohort had the opportunity to meet former President Clinton during one of those in-person events. So those are the mentoring programs. And then someone want to talk about the scholarship program?
Sure. I'm not sure if Danny's on, but at the very least, I'll just point you all in the direction where you can read more information. So in the annual report, there is information about that gives more context to the study abroad and internship spring and summer 2023. So the scholarships are for 2023 for undergraduate and graduate degree seeking students. We had 8 recipients this year who received $1,000 scholarships. And so that information was disseminated earlier in the year in the application through our email as well as our social media.
Very good. Any other questions? I'm looking for raised hands. There's nothing in the chat.
And not only questions, but if you may have, an experience that you'd like to share of BPIA and what your any key takeaways or things. Now, we will be having our breakout key sessions to receive more feedback, but if there was anything you'd like to share with the general body, we're also open to that as well.
So I'll give it 10 seconds. I'm looking for hands. Are there any?
I see Earl is raising his hand, I think.
Hi.
Good morning. Good morning. Glad to be on. Thanks for the report. Great report. A question that, and I came on a little late because, question is whether the elections results have been tallied and that's done and that's reported on. But whether or not that is. My question is, are all the board positions filled and either now or as a result of the elections? And if not, can you talk about what that will mean as an action priority?
So I can take that on behalf of the governance committee, which ran the elections process this year. So yes, we're excited to report that the elections have closed and the votes have been tallied and we've audited those results. We're going to be announcing those towards the end of the session today. And then your second question in terms of whether all the positions have been filled, there is an open position for treasurer currently. And so the new board will need to take that up under the guidance of the president in terms of making that appointment.
Okay, and that's the only one. Very good. Okay, all right. That's always a tough one. Thank you.
Yeah, exactly. And then there was a question from Jasmine, which probably we should link her with Danny. Are there any study abroad scholarships that are still open? And then from Anaya, how should we go about finding members who are abroad? I'm wrapping up my master's in international development in Paris and would like to connect with any members.
Cindy, I'm happy to take that. So we have a few ways that you can connect and find members who may be in different places. So first is through our members only directory portal that's in our website. So when you log in the members only area, we do have a directory there. We encourage members to make sure that their information is up to date there so that folks are able to find and connect. You can also visit our Slack channel where we do have regional channels there where you may be able to connect. And then lastly, I've seen some amazing connections that have happened through the opportunity board. So if you're in a country or in a city, I'd also recommend posting that to the opportunity board, just saying, hey, I'm here in this city doing, studying this for my graduate school. And if anyone is here, then you'd love to connect.
There's also a question about what was BPIA's role in the recent USA president meeting with African presidents in DC.
Excuse me, sorry about that. Could you repeat the question, Cindy?
The question is, what was BPIA's role in the recent meeting with presidents in Washington, D.C.? So I think this was like the White House initiative around African leaders that took place towards the end of last year. Did we?
Yeah, so BPIA was formally invited. Well, I was as the leader of the organization to the U.S. Africa Leadership Summit for the Young Leaders Forum that they had hosted, and we're engaging with leaders across the diaspora. So we were there present and accounted for. Our voices were heard in that room. I also was there joined by our dear keynote speaker today, Mr. Melvin Foote. So I'm sure he'll have some reflection to also share on that, on the summit at large as that convening occurred. We were also official co-sponsors for the Microsoft Foreign Policy for America reception that was hosted that Thursday and open to our members, that featured keynote speakers like Congresswoman Barbara Lee and other executives from Microsoft and a few other corporations, Meridian as well.
Fantastic. And I see that members are connecting in the chat.
Awesome. We'd love to see it. We'd love to see it.
We'd love to see that. And so I think that that has answered everyone's questions. There's some answers in the chat about the study abroad scholarships as well. And we've also put the link to the report in the chat. Any final hands up highlights that people would like to share from the year already?
All right. If not, I'm also going to place my email here into the chat. If you have any questions directed to me specifically, please don't hesitate to reach out and let us know how BPI can continue to help and serve you as a member of our community. And so with that, I'll pass it over to Sandila for the next portion of our program, our keynote address. Thanks, Sandila.
Very, very much, President Maloney. So I'll now turn it over to Alexandria, a governance co-chair, to introduce our keynote speaker. Thank you.
Thanks, Sandili. I hope everyone's enjoying their Saturday afternoon with us. I'm Alexandria Haidara, podcast host for Global Take and BPIA board member. I'd like to introduce you to our keynote speaker, Melvin Foote, who is the president and founder for Constituency for Africa. Excuse me. Mr. Melvin Foote has worked on African issues for more than 35 years. He has traveled and worked extensively in more than 35 African countries. He is a former Peace Corps volunteer serving in Ethiopia and Eritrea in the 70s. And for the past 25 years, CFA, a Washington, D.C.-based network of organizations, groups, and individuals, has been instrumental to the progress and the empowerment of Africa and African people worldwide. CFA's mission is to build public and private support for Africa and to help shape U.S. policies toward Africa. In 2002, Mr. Foote also founded the African American Unity Caucus, a broad-based coalition of African American and other Americans of African descent who are led or are leaders of African-focused organizations and groups, aiming to promote Pan-African cooperation and link diaspora leaders to the Western Hemisphere, from the Western Hemisphere with the African Union. Mr. Foote has also served on high-level delegations, serving as advisor to the White House on critical U.S.-Africa policy, particularly the Rwandan genocide and the war between Ethiopia and Eritrea in 1998. He has served as a consultant for the World Bank on African diaspora issues, as well as advised African Union's ambassador to the United States. And more recently, he's made a huge impact on the shaping of the U.S. Africa Leaders Summit as well. So we're very excited about Mr. Foote joining our BPIA annual members meeting. So let's give him an emoji welcome of applause. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning. Can everybody hear me? Yeah?
Yes, we can hear you. Mm-hmm.
First, let me say that my bio needs to be updated. I think I sent you the old one. Add about 10 years to that, okay? CFA has been involved, really, 1990 is our start date. And so do the math. And I've been involved in Africa going on 50 years now. I'm with you, Earl. So we go back, our hair was black back then, right? So anyway, I'm certainly honored and pleased to be asked to address BPIA. And I recall back in the early days of BPIA, Barbara Patterson and so forth, with the mission back then. But I want to especially shout out to your president, Alexandria Maloney. I call it the way it is. One of the reasons I'm not in government is because I call it the way it is. And I can say that she's absolutely a force of nature, a wonderful person, and she is aiming to get the job done. And so I don't think you can ask for a better president than you currently have. You need to make her president for life. like they do in Africa, because she's a superb person to be in Washington. She's a personality, but she's heard, and she's getting the mission and the message of BPIA widely circulated. Now, I was asked to talk about the strategies for building a constituency for Africa in the U.S. and the diaspora, and which encompasses what I've been doing for 50 years. Background, like I said, I grew up in Rockford, Illinois, which is about 75 miles northwest of Washington. Everybody there was there because they were running from the South, from Jim Crow, and they went there to take factory jobs. And my parents were no exception. So I grew up in a factory town. No one goes to college there. No one does anything extraordinary, but you get a high school diploma and then you get a job in a factory. But I was determined to get out of there. And because I played basketball, and I was pretty good back in the day. I had a great hook shot. And so I had scholarship offers. My criteria, no one told me about college. I didn't have any idea about what school is good, what school is not good. So my criteria was, I'm gonna go to the school as far away from home as possible. And so I ended up in the mountains of Colorado, 200 miles southwest of Denver, Western State. And so I went to play basketball. And first one in the family really to graduate from college. So that was a novel kind of thing. No one expected me to be doing anything other than, I was thinking I might be a school teacher or might be a basketball coach or something like that. That was my goal. But my senior year there, I started a column in the newspaper. This was in the late 60s, early 70s. I started a column in a newspaper called The Back of the Bus. And so every week I wrote about Black people. I wrote about Martin Luther King and Malcolm X. And I wanted to educate the cowboys out there about Black Americans. And so a guy wrote me a note one day and said, look, I would like to see you. And so we met for coffee at the student union. He was a Peace Corps volunteer in Ghana, a white guy from Michigan. He fell in love with his girlfriend, who was Ghanaian, and he was going to marry her. And he wanted my opinion about it because his family was going to disown him and all that kind of thing. Well, I'm not a love counselor. You love who you love. But I said, okay, what is this Peace Corps? And so he briefed me on what the Peace Corps is. So I put in my application, and sure enough, I didn't hear anything for several months. But 6 months later, I got a letter from the Peace Corps saying, you've been accepted into the Peace Corps, and you're going to go to Ethiopia. Well, I thought Ethiopia because, in the Bible, they talk about Ethiopia and Jerusalem and Bethlehem. I thought Ethiopia was in the Middle East. I didn't know it was even in Africa. And back then, you couldn't Google. So, you had no way of learning, knowing where things were at. Today you can just put it into Google and you get your search. I'm sure with this new stuff coming out, who knows? But so sure enough, I went to the library, found an atlas, and found a map of Africa and saw Ethiopia within the heart of Africa. So that's how I learned I was going to Africa, and I was happy about that because in the 60s we were talking about riots and Black Power. And so I just said, well, gee whiz, if I go to Africa, that's Black Power. And so I graduated in June, and July I was headed to Ethiopia. Now I didn't know anything about Africa at the time. Only thing I knew was Biafra, the war was going on. I knew about apartheid, and I knew about Idi Amin, and I knew about Tarzan because all we saw on TV was Tarzan movies. And so I'm thinking we're going to land in Ethiopia, and Tarzan might be at the airport to take us to the village. And that's how ignorant we were at the time because we didn't know anything at all about Africa. So I was there. I spent the first 3 years. There was during the time of the revolution when Haile Selassie was being deposed. There was a major famine going on in the country. Nobody told us about any of that. So I was posted to Asmara, which is the capital of Eritrea. Back then it was a state of Ethiopia, but it was an occupied state. And so I was sent to Asmara. I was shocked when I got to Asmara because Asmara is the most modern city you ever want to see. It was going to be the Italian capital of Africa, and so you got the cappuccino on the sidewalks. And I was surprised about that because I was thinking all I'm going to see in Africa is jungle. My father told me you're going to get eaten by a lion. I thought, I didn't know, and so to get to Asmara was but I was there my first year. I was working with the YMCA, and I was so it was an occupied city. There were soldiers on every corner. I thought that just was security in Africa. I didn't think anything about it. So one day I got a message from the U.S. Embassy saying, be at the airport at 2 o'clock. By 2 o'clock, carry one bag. And I was being evacuated. I didn't even know that. And so that day, that is when the war broke out. It was funny because when I arrived in Asmara, I arrived on their New Year's Day, which is in September. They have a 13-month calendar, and I arrived so I got there, and I got my hotel downtown. It was a beautiful city, 75 degrees, 80 degrees, wonderful weather. And so that evening, it was starting to get dark. I hear a lot of noise outside, boom, boom, pow, pow. I'm thinking New Year's Day, so it must be the 4th of July. So I took a shower, put on some clothes, get ready to go out into the streets to see the festivities. Well, the woman downstairs said, you can't go out there. So I go back up and look out my window. There were tanks in the street, machine guns going off, and, all kinds of crazy stuff. I didn't know there was even a war going on because Peace Corps back then didn't tell you anything. They said, don't get involved in the internal affairs of the country. So I got evacuated and I got sent to Harar, which is in the east. It was a Muslim city. They had me in the YMCA, which is in the capital, in the center of the old city, the Muslim city. I'm working in the YMCA, and I wonder why none of the kids would come to the YMCA to play table tennis or basketball. Well, one of them told me, look, this is we're Muslim. We can't go to the Christian house. And I said, wow, how would you put a YMCA in the Muslim city? But anyway, I spent my career there. I saw the famine up front, up close. I learned a whole lot about it. I was young, impressionable. I thought it was just great being in Africa. A lot of the Ethiopians thought I was Ethiopian. In fact, the school kids, when we were learning our language, we used to walk to school every day, and all the kids would run up and they would shake the hands of all the white volunteers, and they would just walk right past me. And I was kind of, hey, wow, his brother's home. Well, I come to find out, they looked at me and said, well, he must be from another part of the country. He speaks funny, but he's clearly an Ethiopian or an African. And that's when I started getting real comfortable, when I realized that they looked at me as just another African, And so I spent, the 3 years. I came back and, got my master's degree. And then I went back to Somalia as country director for an organization called Africare. This was during the time of the war with Ethiopia. And so I spent about 7 years in the Horn of Africa. And, I came back with Africare. I was in charge of educating Americans about Africa. Africare was a relief and development agency owned and controlled by Black people. And it was the most powerful organization of all of them because we were relating to Africa. Well, Africare no longer exists. And that's a whole nother story that I'm not going to get into. Do your research on that. But my job was to educate Americans about Africa. So I was all over the country. This was during the time of the Ethiopia famine. And so, I'm trying to educate Americans about what Africare do. They plant trees, build wells, do irrigation systems. Rural development was their mission. And so I was trying to educate people about the need to build wells and health clinics when all of a sudden the Ethiopia famine hit. And everything was about we are the world. And, I'm running around picking up checks from Baptist conventions, But I've been involved in Africa my whole career since the early 70s. And, out of Africare's work, CFA was formed. I decided to form a network called Constituency for Africa because there was a number of Black organizations working in Africa at the time, but they weren't working together. Everybody was like a kingdom. You had Trans-Africa, you had Africare, you had the Washington Office on Africa, Africa Action, you had the National Council of Negro Women had an Africa program, and many others. But none of them would talk to each other. Everybody was competing for the money, and they were competing for the media attention. So I decided to build this network called Constituency for Africa. And at the core of it would be all these organizations who would be on the executive committee of it. So it wouldn't be made by Africare. The decisions were going to be made by all the organizations, but we can share information, we can improve cooperation, we can improve coordination, and then we can have a bigger impact on Africa because we're united. And so CFA was formed as a network of Black organizations working on Africa. In 1994, I started to get a lot of traction. Jet Magazine, most of you young people will never know what Jet Magazine is, but Jet Magazine was the Black publication that was everywhere. It was in the barber shop, in the beauty shop, and it was.
Hey, we know Jet. We know Jet, Mr. Melvin.
I saw all those young people at your program. I said, they don't even know what Jet is. But, got real close to you. So anyway, my job was to educate Americans about Africa. CFA became an independent organization because my Africare got jealous of my work. Now, my boss told me, he said, you're going to be the voice of Africare. So I became the voice of Africare. Next thing you know, I'm in magazines, I'm in Ebony Magazine, I'm in all of these publications, USA for Africa, USA Today. I was in all these magazines. And so my boss told me one day, he took me in the lobby of Africare, he said, there's going to be one spotlight in this place. And he said the spotlight was going to be on him. Wow. He gave me 1 week to leave and to form Africare, form CFA as an independent organization, which I did. I found a little office near the Washington Post then, and my assistant came with me, and CFA became an independent organization in 1994. It was the same month that Nelson Mandela got his freedom. Amandla, a CFA became independent the same month that Nelson Mandela got his independence. I'm writing my book, by the way, and so some of this will be in the book for sure. But I didn't like it. It was a bad decision for Africare. They lost their base in the process. And then CFA had to start out as an organization, raise money, and Africare died. They're no longer existing, partly because they no longer had their base. And CFA never gained the momentum that we had back then. We never gained that momentum. Even 20-something years later, I can say that we still we lost traction. And you can blame white people for a lot of things, but we also got to look at ourselves on some of these decisions that we made. So the mission of CFA is to educate the public about Africa, to improve cooperation and coordination among organizations that work on African issues. And we work to shape U.S. policy toward Africa. And I would say that we've had a lot of success in that process. There's a lot of major initiatives that CFA was really at the forefront. The Africa Growth and Opportunity Act, we took it around the country and held town hall meetings around the country. I used African ambassadors because nobody outside the Washington Beltway even knew anything about Africa. That's pretty much still true today. And so all of a sudden we had showed up in Memphis, Tennessee with 5 ambassadors in tow, and Cincinnati and Denver and other cities around the country. We used Black Caucus members to host these meetings. And, for the first time, a lot of African Americans got a chance to shake a hand of an ambassador. And so the ambassadors, at that time, the U.S. policy toward Africa was, dump some food on Africa. They're starving, drop it out of the airplane, and keep going. And some of those pallets from the airplane hit people and killed people on the ground, And so, the Africans were saying back then, we want a different kind of relationship with the United States based on trade, mutual respect. And so the Africa Growth and Opportunity Act grew out of that initiative, and CFA led the charge to get public support for it and to get Congress to pass, and Bill Clinton to sign it into law. PEPFAR, my former chairman at the time was Congressman Ron Dellums from California, and Dellums was another force of nature. He had a big afro. If you go to the airport with him, boy, you have throngs of people come running at you because they wanted to shake the hand of Ron Dellums. But Ron went to South Africa and saw the AIDS crisis up front with orphans and that sort of thing. And he came back and said he would take the leadership of CFA, but we had to shift our focus from AGOA to HIV/AIDS and to build a global response for AIDS. And so CFA did that. We came up with what we call the AIDS Marshall Plan. And it called on the U.S. government to scale up and other global players, countries around the world, to scale up their effort to address HIV/AIDS in Africa and globally. And so George Bush was the president then. We were trying to push him to do $1 billion for AIDS in Africa. He goes before the State of the Union address and said $15 billion for AIDS in Africa. And I can tell you that Ryan was blown away. I was blown away. The whole board was blown away. But it was CFA that was the catalyst to get them to commit to focus on AIDS in Africa. And, kudos to President Bush for doing it. By the way, CFA has always been bipartisan. Even while Andy Young was my first chair, followed by David Dinkins, the former mayor of New York. Ron Dellums, I think, was third. But our vice chair during that time was Republican Jack Kemp, who later ran with the running mate for Bob Dole for the president of the country. So CFA has always been bipartisan. For us, it's always been not about Republican or Democrat, but what about Africa? And what we found was Republicans were just as committed to Africa, if not more, than Democrats in many cases. And so CFA always embraced that. Now, that gets into this whole Republican stuff we got now. That's a whole other thing. But I would say then Obama came along. Obama sent his aide to me, and he knew what we did with HIV/AIDS in Africa. And the message was, what should I do? Because the U.S. economy had crashed when Obama took office. We know what happened. They intentionally crashed it. And so Obama followed George W. Bush, who was probably the most effective U.S. president in history on Africa. So here comes Brother Obama, and all the Africans say, "Oh, the brother's here, so we, the door is open." Well, Obama didn't have the resources that Bush had, and plus he had to spend his first couple of years riding the ship here, getting the U.S. economy working, clunkers for cash and all this kind of thing to get people back to work. And so, but he wanted to send a message to Africa that he's concerned about Africa. He's going to do what he can to help Africa, but he needed to buy some time. So he asked me, what did I think that he can do? So I wrote a paper, and I told him, one, don't spend your collateral on dealing with these African dictators, Mugabe and Biya and Bashir and all the others. Don't waste your time on those guys because they're not going to change. But spend your time on the young ones coming up, the next generation coming up in Africa. There's all kinds of young people who don't embrace the corruption and all the problems Africa got. And he loved the idea. That became what we know as the Young African Leaders Initiative, YALI. And the first year they flew me around Africa to talk about it. But then after that, they start pushing me away. Again, it's a matter of a Black person having this idea. And rather than say, hey, congratulations, all of a sudden there got to be something else. Then they started saying, well, Obama had a dream and he came up with a YALI. Come on. And so somebody asked him, one of the journalists asked him, and he said, look, people give me ideas all the time. My staff give me, if they're good ideas, I take them. Great, I'm happy with that. So I got the White House to, during the genocide in Rwanda, I got the White House to fly 40 of us to Rwanda to assess the genocide. And Kagame had just brought his troops into Kigali. And so we went to a firsthand visit of Rwanda during the genocide. And we went to the camps, we went to Burundi, we went to, made our assessment. It was the most shocking kind of thing. But again, you say, okay, how does some of this have happen? Well, the reason we're able to do what we do is a lot of it has to do with network, access to opinion makers and decision makers. I've always been a fair player. Members of Congress, I understood what members of Congress really want. They really want to get reelected to Congress, So if you can approach them and give them something that's going to help them look good and be on the right side of history, you can get what you want out of Congress. So I developed a lot of, it's a small, CFA remains a very small organization. You would be shocked at how small. When I saw your budget, I said, gee whiz, I was jealous. I was jealous, Let me say that I got $100-something thousand in the bank. Wow, that's amazing. But So for me, I understood that I'm not going to get funding to do what I do. I got some funding in the early years from Ford Foundation, Carnegie Corporation, and others, Chevron. But during the Trump years, funding just got cut off from not just CFA, but all the Black organizations. And the idea was let them die, you know. And all of a sudden you get these calls, oh, I'm sorry, we can't have you in the budget this year. Okay, so in my view, one, I knew the organization had to be lean, mean, catalytic, and you know, networked, because they're not going to be based on a budget. I look at some of my colleagues, the Brookings Institution, CSIS, and some of the other, got really millions and millions of dollars at their disposal, and they can't do what I do. You know, I have the limited impact. Let me fast forward to the Biden administration, and you know, Kamala Harris is a deputy director for Africa, which when they took power with a good friend of mine, Jessica Davis-Bah, and Jessica just got named. She just went out as the U.S. ambassador to Cote d'Ivoire. And I'm very happy about that. I actually introduced her and her husband, Amadou Maktar Bah. They met in my office. You know, I introduced them, and they went on to have 5 sons, wonderful sons. This is the most wonderful African American story that I could ever think of. But they have 5 wonderful sons, and they didn't name one of them after me. I'm disappointed about that, but other than that, I love them. So she was the director for Africa for the vice president, and she called me up and said, "Look, we're gonna craft a strategy for Africa that hasn't been in place. You know, something never. And so we want your ideals. You know, give us your thoughts on what should go into the strategy." So I immediately convened African Americans and different spirit. We had about 40, 45 people, and we had several meetings with policymakers and so forth, members of Congress, and we crafted our recommendation for the Biden strategy on Africa. Then we met with Dana Banks, who was within the senior director for Africa at NSC. We met with Molly Fee, who was the assistant secretary for Africa, and we met with others in the State Department, AID, and with in the White House, and shared the paper with them. They read the paper. And sure enough, when you look at the Biden strategy that was released by Anthony Blinken, you know, I'm a happy camper. You know, all the stuff about diaspora, that came from us. You know, the stuff about small businesses came from us. The effort to strengthen YALI and young African leaders, you know, that came from us. And so we're very happy about the Biden strategy. So that come to summit last December. You know, of course, we had a lot to do with it. You know, the policy paper, eventually the Blinken Africa policy drove it. But I was asked about a lot of things, and so we had a diaspora day that Alexandria and I participated in, and there were several other things that the recommendations we made got implemented. Now, the weakness of the summit, you know, the U.S. government did a superb job. Dana Banks and Dina Laura Matley, who's now the senior director for Africa, she's also a former, I kind of mentored her and helped her to, you know, we worked with her on a number of things. And so they did a superb job. The U.S. government, on a scale of 1 to 10, I give it a 12. You know, the implementation was extraordinary. We were thinking maybe 20 African leaders come, because you heard all this grumbling, where they ended up with 49. You know, everybody came. But the problem with the summit was the Africans were not organized. They did not meet in advance of the summit. They came here on their own. You know, on their own airplane, they just ran to Washington, ready to, you know, to eat from the American pie. And so they didn't meet. They didn't have a strategy coming in here. So Burundi came and said, "Oh, come to Burundi. You know, here you got Gambia. It's about as big as Washington. Talking about come to Gambia. You know, come on." I think if they would have came and asked for, "Hey, Mr. Biden, we got 4 things we want from you. A, B, C, D." They would have left here with 2 of them. The third one by the end of this year. By the time you get to the 4th one, you added a couple of things. You know, you build on it. But where is the Africa Union on all this? The Africa Union, when they opened up the office in 2013, the Ambassador Amina Ali from Tanzania was the first, you know, diplomat to head it, and I was her best advisor during her time here. And, so finally she decided to run for president of Tanzania. And so they replaced her, and they replaced her with Ambassador Eritrea Chiambori, who was living in Nashville, a medical doctor. And they picked her as the next head of the Africa Union. Well, Eritrea was dynamic, no doubt about it, extraordinarily charismatic, and did a lot of things, but her head got to be that big. And next thing you know, she was running afoul of the AU itself. And the next thing you know, they decided to pull her out, and she fought them, and it became very ugly. She was really social media savvy. And so they finally pulled her out. But part of their strategy was to cut off anybody who was working with her. Well, I work with her because I work with whoever the AU put in office. So why you cut me off? They have. I haven't met with her replacement, and it's been 2 years. And so they ran away from the core mission of the Washington D.C. AU mission, which was to build the diaspora as the sixth region for Africa. And so they ran away from that because they're fighting Eritrea. So that's kind of where we are today. I want to say something to some of your members. One, I didn't go government because, again, I think if I was in government, if I would have went to the government, my head would have rolled down the hall within 3 months, because I am outspoken and I do say what I mean. And in a government, you really do have to walk the walk. You have to be part of the team. And I don't think I could have functioned in that capacity. So I decided to work with government, but I also work with who I want to work with. As the diaspora organization, I go to the Pan-African meetings. Julius Garvey, who's the son of Marcus Garvey, is one of my best friends, and we're talking about, all kinds of things about Black power and Black empowerment. And so I'm much more comfortable outside of government. I don't want a boss. I don't want anybody. I got a board, but my board knows that, hey, we're all friends, and we go from there. But I would just say one of the things I did early, I started my own company. I have a consulting practice, Africa Advisory Service. I don't do a lot of work. It's not a loud organization, but I do 3 or 4 projects a year. I get paid for them. And that really has allowed me to think about retirement and think about some other kind of things. So if you're in the nonprofit space, you definitely got to think outside the box. And you got to think freedom, and you got to think your own survival as you move toward your career. I mean, sure, some jobs will not allow you to do it, but I think about, and so I like the ideal of freedom. If you're a non-governmental organization or something, also have your LLC on the side. And so you can actually, I know all of the Black organizations that work on Africa, all of them are gone now. This all happened over the last 15 years. Africare is gone, Trans-Africa is gone, Washington Office on Africa is gone, Africa Action is gone, National Council of Negro is not what it used to be at all. And many others are all gone. The only one, the last one standing is Constituency for Africa. And I guarantee you, they looked at it and said, okay, how old is this guy? He can't do much if you don't have money. And I think that's where they are with me. So I keep doing what I'm doing, but I do it with a total lack of resources. If I had to now, one of my biggest pet peeves with the U.S. government, and I pressed them on this, they got to help fund organizations like CFA. One of the things that came out of the summit, they said they agreed they're going to set up a diaspora committee to advise the president on Africa. And so, wow, they put out a big, memo on it. And so now the question is, who's going to be on that committee? I found out the committee is going to be 12 people. Somebody like Alexandria Maloney need to be on that committee. She need to be chairing that committee. But, my suspicion, they tried to do this back in during Clinton years. They called it the National Summit on Africa, and they gave them like $7-8 million. But the person they appointed was a guy named MacArthur DeShazer, who was director for Africa NSC, who was a wonderful person, but he was a military guy. He came out of the U.S. military. And you appoint them the head of the diaspora? Come on. Everybody's saying, oh, CIA. And so the National Summit on Africa, which is really dead. The last director actually passed away right before the summit, Patricia Bain. But by that time, it had already withered down to next to nothing. But so okay, they forced me to be on the board, but they didn't want to let me do anything. And you know, okay, that'll all be in the book. That'll all be in the book.
Look,
But,
and we look forward to reading it, Mr. Foote. We're here at 11 o'clock. We wanted to leave some time for Q&A from
Okay.
folks.
Anyway.
And so I just want to say thank you so much. This is validating for me. We need a off the record event with you, Mr. Foote, because we know this was just scratching the surface. I knew that this man was the real talk when he was sitting with the world leaders in the world leader section at the summit. And with my own eyes, I saw Idris Elba walk up to this man and shake his hand. Okay, Idris Elba walked up to Mr. Foote to shake his hand. That's how I knew that he was the real deal. And so with BPIA, we just want to honor and uplift you and the work that you have done, Mr. Foote. That we are thankful in our community and the world for your service, whether regardless of the circumstances that you continue to go and persist. We put the link to the Biden report from CFA. That report is basically the playbook, in my opinion, that the administration has used for their many of their policy towards Africa as it stands right now, as well as the YALI programs and other efforts that I'm sure that you were very central in. And so I just wanted to give you your flowers while we're here together as a community. You know, we would love to invite you back for an off the record conversation, in person or virtual. You're getting we get a lot of responses here in the chat, a lot of questions, a lot of interest. I hope it's okay that we share your LinkedIn so folks can be able to view your work and follow you there. And with that, I'll pass it to Alexandria Haidara. You can let's say we have time for 2 questions before we move on to the breakout. So Alexandra, I'll pass it to you.
All right, thank you so much. Wow, that was you just been everywhere. So we just want to start asking some of the questions I see from the chat. So Ms. Thank you for sharing your insights, and I love your energy. My 2-part question is, do you think there are still too many aid organizations operating on the continent, competing for grant funds and absorbing administrative costs, and why?
No, I don't think so. I just think they need to be reorganized, restructured. A lot of stuff that they're pitting organizations against one another. Some of this, you have to actually impact the policy because if you leave it up to the practitioner over here, they're going to pit people against each other, and the net result. I mean, what is the role of African NGOs? There was a time when we didn't think we could work with African, and you can't trust them. And so we had to send CARE and Save the Children over there to save Africa. Come on, there's a lot of things that need to be changed, and BPIA members need to be at the forefront in changing it.
Okay, and then what are your thoughts on the balance between providing foreign aid versus encouraging self-actualization?
We need both. We need both. Absolutely. We're the wealthiest country in the world, and we got obligations and responsibilities. A lot of these problems in Africa are because of Western policies, pitting countries against punching, dividing up. It goes back to the Berlin Conference. And so you just can't say that Africans are responsible. All these problems in Sahel right now because of the U.S. war on terror, all those weapons that we took out Gaddafi, and we didn't secure those weapons. Those weapons ended up in the hands of terrorists. They went straight across the desert and are attacking Mali, Burkina Faso, Chad, Niger, and all the front lines there. Who's responsible for that? You can't blame the African for it. They asked Trump for support, and Trump said, we could sell you weapons. I know somebody. Let me give you a name. You could buy weapons from them. Whoa, this is the U.S. response to the crisis that we exacerbated.
Yeah, I mean, that is quite remarkable, just hearing your perspective on that. I think another question we have is going back to Cote d'Ivoire, how can the African diaspora and African Americans help in the current Sahel crisis? And then 2, how can young African Americans continue to work together? Let me just
Well, in my case, I was knighted by the government of Mali in 2021. And so I'm a Maliite, if you will. And I'm working with the U.S. ambassador there. We're going to host a meeting with the Malian diaspora so that she can have a regular contact with the diasporans who are over here, who can give her some ideas about what can be done. Because right now, we sat down with her, and her thinking is, oh, we got to have elections. We got to do this. And, hey, You know, we over here talking about democracy in Mali. Look at our own country. You know, who are we to, you know, what they call it, the skillet calling the kettle black, you know? And you know, we have to be more involved. We have to become advocates. I would urge you to you know, put on that advocate, because some of the things, our approach to Africa is absolutely wrong. You know, Biden is trying his best to turn it around a bit, but it's so far, you know, it has a long way to go to be right. And our whole approach to Africa, based on slavery, you know, we're stealing off the people and dragging them over to the West. And what happened to that talent that Africa had that we poured out? There's a lot of factors. This is a long-term question that could take several hours to debate. But there's a lot more that we could be doing. We're nowhere near where we need to be in terms of African unity. Part of this is to make sure Africa and the diaspora unite. And part of the strategy of the U.S. government have been to make sure we don't unite. So they bring these Africans over here. They send them to school out in Nebraska, Iowa, Kansas. I've been out there and talking to them. Wow, what are you Africans doing living like? They don't bring them to Washington. They don't take them to where Black Americans are at. You know, they want you to, by the time they bring them to Washington for a job, you know, they hate us, you know, because they went to the white church. They may have given them a spouse. And by the time they get to Washington, they don't want nothing to do with these Black Americans, you know, and that's intentional. So part of this is an education process, a linkage process, but I think a BPIA is perfectly suited to be in that space.
All right, well, do we have any other questions from the audience? Thoughts, comments? Oh, I do see something. What do you think about more African nations wanting to be a part of the GSI? Or is it? Want to join the BRICS.
Africans are trying to think. You have the Continental Free Trade Agreement, which was launched a couple of years ago, and it has tremendous promise, you know. But are we really trying to support it? I don't think so. We want diamonds, oil, gas, minerals. Now that we hugging Democratic Republic of Congo. Why? Because they got these minerals. It's not because of the people or we have a special affinity to it. The game is still to get access to African minerals and get it real cheap. So corruption is in play. You know, pitting countries against each other is in play. So we have a lot of work to do. I think we are, as the advocate for Africa, as a diaspora, we have to make sure our country does right by Africa. And you know, some of you who are working in government can't make that statement. But if you have our ability to stand on the outside, it's important for you at least to be a voice of fairness and correction. They call us African Americans because we love Africa and we love America. You know, I'm an American, but I'm also an African, and I'm proud of that myself. But I think we have a lot of work to do to educate Americans about Africa and to make sure the U.S. government and U.S. government policies are not harmful for Africa. That they're implemented in a way that Africa wins and America win, you know?
Okay. Well, on that note, thank you so much, Mr. Melvin. We really appreciate all of your insight. You've given us some clarity. It's love to hear these background stories of how these major U.S. foreign policy towards Africa came to shape.
It's been a joy for me. I've enjoyed the morning. Thank you very much for having me.
Okay, then. Well, we are going to go into our breakout rooms, but Billy or Alexandria, you guys have any remarks?
Yeah, I just wanted to say thanks again, Mr. Foote. You know, there's a lot of food for thought there, not only on how the U.S. should engage with African governments going forward, but also on how to build a sustainable career in this space that really allows you to maintain your flexibility. You know, and we heard in what you do, where you do it, and who you do it with. So thanks again for that. So we'll now be shifting to some member-to-member engagement in 15-minute breakout rooms. We're going to ask that members reflect and discuss on thoughts on activities over the past year, ideas for the year ahead. In particular, what did you value most about last year's activities? What would you like to see more of? And how can BPIA support more member-led committee initiatives? So please take note of what you discuss in your breakouts because we'll have a brief plenary afterwards. So if the team could now open those breakout rooms and push people in. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Sandila.
Okay, so, yep, so I've already created the breakout room, so you guys can go ahead and join them.
All right, and as we place people, please let us know if you need help joining your breakout room. And I'm going to broadcast a quick message.
I wonder, can I put myself in a breakout room?
Yeah, let me try to do it. Also, let's pause.
Yes, I will share what we discussed. One of the ideas was bringing in more students to the organization, like capacity building among young professionals, providing tools and opportunities for mid-level professionals to advance in their careers, creating a reward system for people who have made like a positive contribution to the organization, study abroad opportunities, doing like a youth program to Africa, but starting with high schoolers, a roundtable for professionals from different fields, a workshop for business matchmaking. And I don't know if I missed anything else, but yeah, those were the main ones.
Thank you. All right, some feedback. Thank you very, very much. And also feel free to put your ideas in the chat. We'll now move to room 3 for the readout.
Okay, I can step in. Hi, everybody. My name is Anaya. Can you all hear me?
That's perfect. Yeah.
Okay, great. Excellent, excellent. Okay, so and please, if there's anything else to add, let me know for my group. But it looked like we talked about just making sure that BPIA is more involved when, excuse me, for instance, the Africa US Summit. I'm not exactly sure how involved BPIA was in that event, but Mel made a great point about, the African leaders not really having a moment to come together and assemble with one another. So maybe BPIA could step in and do that, being that, we have a nice network. So that's the first thing. The second thing would be to continue or start fostering opportunities for people in the Africa diaspora, people in the US, Black Americans, we say, going to the continent. One of our members, Zenobia, she's very well connected, it sounds. She's living in Zambia, and I think there would be great opportunities to bring us over there and really just get to experience the continent. And then the third thing would be having a new members meet and greet. Perhaps there already is one, but I would consider myself a new member as I joined in December. And it would be nice to be able to connect with those who are who've been a part of BPIA for years, and those who are new as well. So we talked about different opportunities to just really connect our new members to our older members and have more cohesion with where we are in the world and just being able to reach out with email addresses, et cetera. So I think those were the three most pertinent points. Please step in if I missed something. Thank you.
Those are fantastic. Thank you so much, Anaya.
No
Group
problem.
4, come on in.
Sure, I'll jump in for group 4. So yeah, we had a great conversation. So there was a shout out for the Off the Record series, just an ask that continues, even if Cliff isn't able to continue as the lead for that. There was just a general ask to get our general members more involved and sharing their ideas and activities, so a way to make that happen. There's some feedback about just the number of emails we receive. Sometimes that can be a copious amount, so maybe some way of consolidating that. There was also a suggestion about more in-person events versus virtual, since there's a little bit of Zoom fatigue that some people have. And that suggestion was both for individuals in the DC area as well as members that are outside of the city or outside of the capital. So if we have a large number of members in grouped cities or even countries throughout the world, if we can find a way to maybe host events in those places in person so people get to know each other. And there was 2 questions. Is there a WhatsApp group for BPIA for people to connect with one another? And then also, is there anywhere for individuals to post either events or opportunities that they're a part of that they could share with individuals? So I'm not sure if that's a part of the opportunities board, if people can post events or not, but those are kind of the big topics that we discussed.
Thank you very, very much. Just on those last 2 pieces, yes, the opportunities board is for that, but the WhatsApp idea, I agree. In the chat, Anaya said too, I think that's a wonderful idea for us to very, very quickly kind of share updates with each other on what's going on, especially as major news events break and BPIA should respond to them. I think that's fantastic. And I also love that idea of the intergenerational kind of new members meeting old members, sharing stories, sharing why new members join would be a wonderful event to hold. Group 5, come on in.
I believe that's our group. I think I have to admit that I kind of forgot in the midst of taking notes, but I believe that's our group. I think some of the things that were mentioned were the greater things that people really liked from last year was that there was a lot of value in the career fairs, and that they would like to see that continue to grow and go because they found it to be very, very excellent in pulling a number of stakeholders and really providing a lot of opportunities for members. And something that members would also like to see is to pull greater engagement beyond Washington, D.C. And I think some of our reflection points was that I think the nature of international affairs just happens to be that Washington, D.C. just happens to be the center of it all, seeing as that is where State Department and all these foreign affairs agencies are, but pulling a greater engagement beyond Washington, D.C. around the United States, and also particularly in the diaspora as well. So I think a number of previous speakers also mentioned pulling in people from the African continent, from the Black diaspora in general, to see how we can increase our broader partnerships there. And a member also mentioned that they would love to see how BPIA can connect and collaborate with DevEx as well. And another member also mentioned kind of being interested in spaces where we can have conversations around international affairs that are Black centered, things like book clubs, which I know Justin Hansford mentioned in the chat as well. So these are just a number of the ideas that we discussed and the things that we are looking forward to. And anybody who was in my group, please feel free to jump in and also add anything as well.
Thank you very, very much. And again, please feel free to continue adding your ideas to the chat. We really do want to collect all of them. This is a perfect segue into our announcement of the Board of Directors elections. They've got a lot of work to do, but they can't do it without your involvement. But on behalf of the current board, we just want to say that we had an incredible slate of candidates for BPIA's Board of Directors this year. Briefly, in terms of process, eligibility for voting was in line with the bylaws. So we allowed 1 vote for each active BPIA member during the open voting period, which ran from January 30th to February 10th. The individual results were captured for the purposes of auditing, and the results have been reviewed by members of the governance committee. 71 members voted altogether in the election. And with a drum roll, now for the results. So for president, for a 2-year term, the winner is Alexandria Maloney. For VP of Business Development and Economic Development for a 1-year term, the winner is Kolofelo Kugler. For VP of Education and Exchange for a 1-year term, the winner is Kyla Denwood. For Secretary for a 1-year term, the winner is Obadan Adeoye. For members at large for 2-year terms, the winners are Jonathan Cummings and Abby Ogunwale. And for members at large for 1-year terms, the winners are Ethel Wedson Derara and Julian Goldstein. So on behalf of the whole board, we recognize and really congratulate the elected Board of Directors. We thank board members that are stepping off the board for their immense contributions and service to BPIA over the years. And we thank the board members that are staying on for their continued service. We'd like to just create a little bit of space now. If any of the candidates would like to say anything, please feel free to raise your hand and come in with an intervention, but please do keep it to less than 90 seconds if you can. I see Cal's got his hand up. Come on in, Cal.
Yes, congratulations to the winner, Alexandria. I appreciate the response from the governance committee that the elections were conducted properly. I think there were 78 voters, not 71 eligible voters, but that's a minor point.
Thank you very much. We've got Kolofelo up next.
Thank you all for your trust, and congratulations to everybody who was elected and those who were not. I'm using this opportunity to, give open invitation to anybody who's interested in business development and entrepreneurship to get in touch. I hopefully will be sending out an email to which you can respond so that we can form a committee and support each other in putting high quality programming. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Kolo. Jonathan, you're up next.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much. It's really an honor to be elected to the board. I'm looking forward to serving as a member at large and bringing my connections, ideas, and leverage anything that I have to bring to this organization. So thank you for your trust. Thank you for supporting me. And I look forward to working with the president and the rest of the board and making BPIA the premier, helping to make BPIA the premier international organization for people of color. So thank you.
Thank you. Alexandria, you're up next.
Awesome. Well, I'll argue we are the premier organization for people of color in the international affairs space. And so I'm honored and privileged to continue to serve this community. It is truly a labor of love, the work that is done here on a fully volunteer basis. And so I'm just grateful for the opportunity to be able to uplift our community in this way and open doors for those of us in the community who want to serve. Anyone who wants to serve, we will make a way. And so we had so many wonderful ideas. And again, we're a small working board, if you will. And so this is your call to action as our members. We need folks, we need you all right in these seats as committee co-chairs, stepping in to lead and help support these efforts as we continue to grow. And so it's my belief that the best is yet to come. Congratulations to the new incoming board, and thank you to the board, the 2022 board, for all your work in helping to build BPIA into what it is today. Thanks.
So again, I don't see any additional hands, but thank you to the entire board, both old and new. So that ends our formal programming for today. We've got about 15 minutes left, and what we want to do there is have an optional networking session. We'll put people back into breakout rooms, and Alexandria, I think they're going to actually be based on different themes. So policy, private sector, national security, for folks to get to know each other a little bit more across the world, but within your sector. And with that, I say thank you and have a great afternoon.
Thank you.
Thank you. Sandila, could you read off the different room themes for me, or just give me a few?
I've got the Hill,
Okay.
international business, state and foreign policy, international development and NGOs, and then the private sector.
Gotcha. All right, stand by. And for this section, folks will be able to, you will be able to select what rooms that you'd like to join in for the networking. So I'm going to go ahead and open the rooms now. So if you go down into the bottom panel,